So yesterday, if you weren't here, we talked about all of the problems with all of the alternate theories for how we came to be outside of special creation, and pretty much punched enough holes in all those to sink them. So today we're going to talk about evidence for a creator, and you know, our belief in God is mostly based upon faith, as it should be. Believing without seeing, and yet God has given us ample evidence that He exists in what He has made. As Romans 1:20 said, that God can be seen through what He has made, and so we're without excuse ultimately. So let's look at some of the scientific evidence this morning, the observable things that we can see that support a creator God. So when we look at something like Stonehenge, you know, you ask an average person, do you think that this was designed or did this happen by chance? And everyone would say that this was designed, right? Same thing if you look at these statues on Easter Island. Were these designed by intelligence, human hands, or did this happen by chance? And I think everyone would agree that this was designed. But then you look at something much more complex than either one of those things, a human eye. Look at all the different parts that are necessary and required for the human eye to work. And it's amazing that we can take the light that we receive into the eyeball, and that goes through the optic nerve up to our brain and understands what we are seeing and makes sense out of it. And we have the ability to see. It's amazing. Archaeologists have no problem identifying man-made objects by discerning the level of complexity and degree of information the object contains. So then why do we have problems identifying a creator-made world that shows obvious intelligence behind it? So here's just a short video with a closer look at the amazing design of the human eye.
The human eye is a marvel of design, much like a video camera, but far more advanced and versatile. Like some cameras, the eye is autofocusing. To do this, man-made cameras have to move the whole lens, but our eye changes the shape of its lens. Like a camera, the eye bends incoming light and creates an image inside the eye. But unlike cameras, the eye also sharpens the image along the edges. Similar to some cameras, the eye automatically adjusts to brightness, so we can see day or night. In fact, in dark conditions, the eye increases its sensitivity to light up to 100,000 times. Eyes are much more sophisticated than cameras. They convert the light image into electrochemical signals, which are sent immediately to a brain that processes the images and makes necessary adjustments. Many other aspects of the eye surpass anything humans can design. Eyes are self-cleaning, self-lubricating, and self-repairing. Even more marvelous, eyes are built automatically in the womb. No camera can repair or build itself. Evidence of design appears in all types of animals. Each eye seems specially designed for its environment, whether an eagle in flight or a fish in the sea. For example, owls have a special surface in the back of their eye which reflects light back through the retina. It helps them to see better in the dark. Flies have another design, a compound eye, which helps them to detect the slightest motion. Such diverse yet exquisitely designed eyes show the handiwork of our Lord.
See, we take something like eyesight and our other senses, we take them for granted. Yet the complexity that's involved in enabling that system to work is beyond comprehension almost, and far beyond anything that humans, with our intelligence, have been able to create or design ourselves. And yet we're to believe that this all happened naturally by accident over millions of years. It's laughable. Harvard astronomy professor Owen Gingerich, senior astronomer at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, said a common sense, and I love that, a common sense and satisfying interpretation of our world suggests a designing hand of a super intelligence. And I say that maybe the world looks designed because it really is designed. And there are a number of well-known creation proponents today that were former evolution professors. And there's Dr. Joe Martin, top middle, who we talked about. He had the conversation with the NASA geologist. And we'll see some videos from him today if we have enough time. These are all guys that, after seeing the complexity of the world around them, realize that obviously there is a designer and thus a creator. The fact is, everything in nature appears as though it were designed, and many evolutionists readily admit this, but as we saw yesterday with the Richard Dawkins video, they'll point to something like aliens having seeded life on Earth, and that's why things look designed here. But again, that just pushes the problem further out. Well, who designed the aliens, right? If they existed, which I don't believe they do, of course. So why do most scientists rule out a creator God while admitting that everything appears designed? Well, here's a few quotes that kind of explain this. Quote from Nature magazine: even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it's not naturalistic. But yet, we talked about some of the other things yesterday that they're willing to admit, they have these grand theories of how things are, but they're not naturalistic because they either go against the laws of science or they're not observable. They have never been observed. Another quote from 1942, so this is how long this has been going on: modern science must rule out special creation. And a much longer quote from Richard Lewontin, who is a geneticist and evolutionist, says, our willingness to accept scientific claims that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failures to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. And that's why they absolutely refuse to change their theories, because there's only two games in town. Either everything happened randomly, by chance, accidentally, or it was created. And anything that sheds doubt or goes against their common theory today of evolution, and anything that shows that there is a designer, none of those things are allowed to be even discussed in a classroom setting. And again, if you're not allowed to discuss all the evidence or the problems with your theory, that's not science. Okay? So it's, again, I am not anti-science at all. I'm against stuff that's called science that's really not. So what further evidence points to a creator God besides the fact that everything is apparently designed? Quickly, the fact that there are laws of nature that never change indicate that the universe didn't form randomly. If the universe just formed randomly without any direction whatsoever, there's no reason to have laws that are in existence and never change and are not broken. Also, now that we're able to drill down and look inside a single cell, we have discovered that it's amazingly complex. So once upon a time, they thought that a cell was just this blob, because they could see a cell from the outside but really couldn't see inside. We just thought it was this blob with some water inside, wherever, not really understanding it. But it's actually more complex than a space shuttle, as you'll see shortly. So one scientist described a single cell as a high-tech factory complete with artificial languages and their decoding systems, memory banks for information storage and retrieval, elegant control systems regulating the automated assembly of parts and components, error fail-safe and proofreading devices utilized for quality control, assembly processes involving the principle of prefabrication and modular construction, and a capacity not equaled in any of our own most advanced machines, for it would be capable of replicating its entire structure within a matter of a few hours. It was just amazing. Everything starts out as one cell, but it has the information in DNA, which we'll talk about shortly, to build all the different cells that are necessary to complete that organism. And humans are made up of hundreds of different types of cells, from hair cells to bone cells. But we start out as one cell, but with the information to produce all the cells needed and the directions to make it, knowing when to make it and how many. It's amazing that all that information is in that first cell. So let me show you the short video, and I apologize because the video is a little choppy, but it gets the point across. This is a computer model of the type of things that are going on inside the cells in your body right now while you're just sitting here listening to me and eating some breakfast.
In DNA, Kenyon encountered a molecule with a property he could not explain through natural processes. For locked securely within its double helix structure is a wealth of information in the form of precisely sequenced chemicals that scientists represent with the letters A, C, T, and G. In a written language, information is communicated by a precise arrangement of letters. In the same way, the instructions necessary to assemble amino acids into proteins are conveyed by the sequences of chemicals arranged along the spine of the DNA. This chemical code has been called the language of life, and it is the most densely packed and elaborately detailed assembly of information in the known universe.
Oh, I loaded the wrong video. Shoot. What's going on is your body has to make new cells constantly, right? We lose skin cells and other cells die, and so the DNA sends instructions to make new cells. The cells are made up of the proteins, but it has to have a lot of proteins to make a cell. So it starts making these proteins, and it's got like this little factory where these enzymes come in, turn into proteins, and the proteins then have to be shaped into specific shapes that then all fit together to make that type of cell. And it's incredible. This kind of manufacturing is going on. You've got things that take finished proteins from one part of the cell to another and build them and put them together, and all this is happening inside your body right now while you're just sitting here. I think it's incredible. The information found within the DNA, I think, is possibly the best evidence for a creator, and that's because information cannot arise by chance. Information has to have intelligence behind it. Everyone agrees that information comes from intelligence. The DNA contains all of the information necessary to build and regulate the organism that it was designed for. And this information isn't random. It's a precise programming language that Bill Gates has said far surpasses anything his best programmers could have written. So it's more complex than the most complex programming language known out there today. And I think it's incredible. And the thing is, they have done experiments. You know, there's basically the four letters of DNA that come together in a certain sequence to make information. And they tried for a long time to see if there was any sort of chemical cause that would cause these things to arrange or to connect in a certain arrangement. There's not. There's nothing that they can point to that would say that the elements of the DNA strand arrange naturally. The only reason it could arrange the way it is by an outside intelligent cause. So, no evolutionists can explain where this information came from or how it got into an organism in the first place. So let's look at an exploded view of an old car. It's probably a Yugo or something, I'm not sure. But look how many parts are in this one vehicle. And that's nothing, because there are over 1 trillion atoms that make up one single cell. And all those have to fit together in a precise way. If they don't go together in the exact way they were designed, you've got major problems, and you're not going to have a cell, essentially. DNA has an astounding capacity to store information, as they talked about in that video. The information needed to build the proteins for all the species of organisms that have ever lived could be held in a teaspoon, and there would still be room left over for all the information in every book ever written. It's amazing. Also, this is hard to believe, but it's true. So, there is 6 feet of tightly coiled DNA inside every one of your cells. So it's a double helix. The helix itself, if you pull it up, would be 3 feet. But since it's a double helix, there's 6 feet of DNA inside every one of your cells. End to end, they would stretch to the moon. Isn't that incredible? That's how densely packed the information in the DNA is. So moving on, in regards to our home planet, it stands out in the universe as unique and ideally designed for life to exist. And I believe that God created Earth to house his creation of man and all the animals, and I don't think there's any other planet out there that's capable of holding life. Now, you always hear in the news, oh, NASA has found some planet that they think could host life, and pretty much the only criteria that they can look at, because we're looking pretty far out into the universe, is that the planet is X distance from a star. So, you know, if it's too close, you couldn't have life because it's too hot. If it's too far, you couldn't have life because it's too cold. So if it's in that good zone there, then they think, well, it could possibly have life, and maybe it could have water, which is also a requirement for life. But that's far too simple. There are at least 200 different finely tuned requirements that enable life to exist on Earth. And if any one of these things would be slightly off in one direction or another, it would be catastrophic for us. So some of these things are the distance between us and the sun, as I mentioned in regards to the stars for other planets, the size of the sun, the distance to the moon, our gravity, the electromagnetic force, the strong and weak nuclear forces. All of these have to be exactly where they are in order for life to exist on Earth. And our planet really stands out in the universe. And there's a phrase, we are a privileged planet. And, you know, almost any argument that creationists have, evolutionists have a counter-argument, and they're typically absurd. Stephen Hawking, who I've mentioned a couple times, very well-known astrophysicist, came up with the idea of multiverses. The idea of a multiverse is there are innumerable other universes out there that we can't see and we've never discovered, but he assumes that there must be millions of other universes out there, and in that many universes there has to be at least one other planet, if not more, that is similar to the Earth with all of those features, the 200 plus requirements for life to exist. So we're really not special, because there must be lots of other planets out there that we just haven't seen yet. So, I mean, that's just the kind of stuff that they qualify as science, and it's ridiculous. Another great proof of a creator and proof that evolution couldn't have happened is the idea of irreducible complexity. That is, every part had to be there from the beginning, or it would not function correctly. Darwin predicted in his book on the origin of species, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. So here's an example. Very simple, a mousetrap. There are not that many parts that make up a mousetrap, but if any one of those parts was missing, it wouldn't work correctly. It wouldn't function. It would be completely useless as a mousetrap. All of the parts have to be there from the beginning or it doesn't work, okay? A mousetrap could not have evolved. But as I talked about earlier, a single cell is made up of over 1 trillion parts at the subatomic level. And we're to believe that that somehow evolved over time? It makes absolutely no sense. Again, you look at a human eye, all of these parts have to be there or it doesn't work properly. And we have, you know, a lot of people have eyesight issues. It's because something is messed up. Out of all these parts, something is messed up. And if something is messed up or is not working properly, then your eye doesn't work properly, right? You have to have everything there to have it work properly. Sunday school gets over at 10:45, is that correct? Okay, perfect. I think we have enough time to watch each of these videos. So, 3 short videos focusing on 3 different animals that really illustrate the idea of irreducible complexity. These are all from a video series that Dr. Joe Martin did. So, we'll start with a woodpecker.
The woodpecker is a very special little bird. The beak of a woodpecker is like industrial strength. It is stronger than other birds' beaks. He has special feet. Most birds have 3 toes out the front, 1 toe out the back. Woodpecker has 2 toes out the front, 2 toes out the back. And that's so he can climb around on a tree trunk, a vertical tree trunk, right side up, upside down, sideways. He can crawl any way he wants to. He has special tail feathers. His tail feathers are different than other birds' tail feathers. They're more resilient, they're spongy, and they're very strong and tough because he tripods himself with his 2 feet and his tail feathers so that he grabs a hold of that tree, fans out his tail feathers, and then bangs his head into the tree. Now, you would think that a woodpecker would go home every night and say to Mrs. Woodpecker, "Oh, I got this headache. I was banging my head on a tree all day." But he doesn't. Why? Because God made him with special equipment. For instance, between his beak and his skull, there's a piece of cartilage. It acts as a shock absorber. His skull is the thickest bone per body weight of any creature. As a matter of fact, brain surgeons study the brains of woodpeckers, how they're hooked in there and everything, to help them with like trauma people in accidents, that they need to put their brains back in there. And so they study woodpeckers. The woodpecker, with his strong skull and his shock absorber and his strong beak and his tail feathers and his feet, he's all ready to go except for one thing. Once he drills his hole, he's got to get that bug out of the tree because that's lunch. All right, well, how's he going to do that? Well, most birds, their tongue goes right to the tip of the beak. A woodpecker's tongue goes as much as 10 inches out of his beak. Now why? Well, because he's going to drill the hole, find the bug tunnel down in the tree, stick his tongue down in the tunnel, and drag the bug out. Now you would have to say, could I stick my tongue down a hole in a tree and drag a bug out? Of course not. Well, how does the woodpecker do that? Well, God made the woodpecker with little barbs on the tip of his tongue, and he will literally stab that bug larva down in there because it doesn't want to come out. But in case that's not enough, he has a little glue factory in his tongue that manufactures precisely the right glue to stick to the bug, but it doesn't stick to his beak. And so he pulls that bug into his mouth. Now we have a problem. If evolution is true, let's say over hundreds of thousands of years, this woodpecker got all this equipment, and then he glues his tongue to a bug and he swallows the bug. What just happened to his tongue? He just swallowed his tongue. You know, he dies, he just strangled himself, okay? But he doesn't. Why? Well, because as he brings the bug into his mouth, he has another little factory that manufactures the solvent to dissolve the glue. So he dissolves the glue, loosens up the bug, swallows the bug. God made him that way. Woodpeckers, when they peck, they open their eyes between each peck, and they aim their beak, they focus, they aim their beak, they close their eyes, and then they hit the tree. So you hear a woodpecker out there, he's going, drrr, drrr. Every time you hear that, drrr, in between each peck, he opens his eyes, focuses, aims his beak, hits the tree. Why? Well, they used to think it was just to keep the wood chips out. But now the scientists have measured the force of the impact of the woodpecker's head against the tree, and the force is so great that if he did not close his eyes, he would pop his eyeballs out. So I would say, have you ever seen a blind woodpecker? No, they never miss. They never miss. Okay? Now, one special woodpecker, the European green woodpecker. I think he's unique in all the animal kingdom. I don't know for sure, but I think he might be. His tongue is different than any other tongue, as far as I know. Our tongue starts in the back of our throat, comes up and out the front. His tongue starts in the back of his throat, goes down the throat, comes out the back of his neck, up over the top of his head. It's under the skin, comes out a little hole between his eyes, goes in one of his nostrils, and then comes out of his beak. And you would have to say, now how does that evolve? I've asked evolutionists that question. I've said, now you tell me, how and where did that tongue come from? They don't have a clue. They can't tell me. I'm saying, well, you're telling me that this bird evolved from some other creature, but there's no other creature that we know of with a tongue like that. How did that happen? They don't have any idea. And then they asked me to start studying some animals and see if I thought that animal could evolve. Well, the first thing that we really studied together was this little bug called a bombardier beetle. And this little insect, it's about a ½ inch long, and it mixes chemicals that explode. So I began to think, okay, now how would that evolve? Let's say if evolution is true, and you're evolving along here, and you don't have a defense mechanism, because that is the defense mechanism of the bug. So if evolution is true, it had to somehow evolve that. So let's say it's coming along here. Well, the first time it evolves the explosion, what does it do to the bug? Boom, you just splattered your bug, okay? So splattered bug pieces don't evolve. So I thought, well, how could this have happened? Well, it doesn't blow itself up. It has another little factory inside itself that manufactures chemicals. A chemical acts as a catalyst so that when you squirt that chemical in with these other chemicals that are like in neutral, you get your explosion. Well, the first time it manufactured that little chemical, here it goes again, blew itself up again. but it doesn't. Why? Well, because it has like an asbestos-lined firing chamber. And even then it would blow itself up if it didn't have somewhere for the explosion to go. So it has like twin tail tubes. And it can aim these tail tubes all the way up, out the side, out the front. Let's say a spider is coming up toward its side and it doesn't have time to turn around and shoot. It can just take its little gun turret and aim it out there and shoot. The explosion on this little bug, all you hear, if you're listening as a human, you hear this pop. But scientists have now put that explosion in slow motion. And it's like about 1,000 sequential little explosions, but they're so fast, all we hear is one pop. And so you think, well, now, why would that be? Well, that was a curious thing for the scientists that study this little bug. A lot of them at Cornell University, some other places. And what they discovered was that if it was just one big pop, the little bug, if he's shooting like a spider, let's say over here, and he goes whoop, bang, and shoots it, he's going to pop himself right out of there. It's like lighting a burner on a jet engine, so he's out of there. But as long as it is a sequential explosion with his little legs, he can hang on. How would evolution explain a sequential explosion? This little bug messes with all the theories of evolution. There is no way a slow, gradual process is going to produce this bug. There's no way even the newest theories of evolution, like punctuated equilibria, which means evolution happens very fast. Well, there's no way that will explain this little bug. I began to realize, how could this particular little animal, for instance, evolve? It needed all of its parts, it needed everything there all at once, or you just don't have the animal. A bull giraffe is about 18 feet tall. In order to get blood up that long skinny neck against gravity, the bull giraffe has to have a powerful pump, and that's his heart. And the heart of a bull giraffe can be as much as 2.5 feet long. Big, powerful pump. Now, as he's going along here, living his life, everything's just fine, but all of a sudden, this 18-foot-tall creature decides, I need a drink of water. So he bends his head down to get a drink of water. Now we have a problem. Because now this powerful pump, instead of pumping against gravity, is pumping with gravity. And so the heart gives a mighty squeeze, and the blood shoots down his neck, hits his brain, and bursts his brain. And so now he just blew his brains out. Okay, so he's dying, and he must be thinking to himself, I need to evolve something here to take care of my problem. When I get a drink of water, I blow my brains out. Of course, we know dead creatures don't evolve. But he doesn't blow his brains out, because as he bends his head down, there are like little spigots in his artery that goes up the neck, little valves, and they close. But the last pump is beyond the last valve. And so it's enough to burst the little arterioles in his brain, but it doesn't go into his brain. The last pump kind of goes whoop underneath the brain into like a sponge. And this sponge just gently expands, and he hasn't blown his brains out, and he gets his drink of water, and now he sees a zebra kind of running up from this side, and he just ignores it. But he sees a lion coming up from this side. Oh, the lion wants to eat me, I got to get out of here. Now, how does he know the difference, by the way? Evolutionists can't explain that to us, but the fact is, here comes this lion, he's going to eat the giraffe, and so the giraffe jumps up, he runs about 5 steps, passes out. Not enough oxygen to his brain. While he's there, passed out, the lion is eating him. He must be thinking, I need to evolve something here. I got this problem. I pass out when I get up too fast. But he doesn't, of course. Well, why? Well, because God made him so that when he begins to bring his head up, the little spigots, the little valves in the artery open. The sponge under the brain gently squeezes that last little pump of oxygenated blood up into his brain. There are little valves in the vein that goes down the neck. They close. And by the time he's up and running, everything is fine, his blood pressure is fine, and he does just fine. Well, how would that evolve? He needs all of those parts, all there, all at the same time, all at once, or he's dead. And so I think the giraffe is another example of a designer. He needed a designer to design him just like he is.
I love those videos. I am constantly amazed by God's handiwork. I mean, he's so creative. He could have made us no animals. He could have made us some 5 animals. He made such an amazing variety of animals and landscapes and everything for us to enjoy. I think is for our pleasure. And it's just incredible. We just take so many things for granted. Like, who would ever thought a woodpecker was so complex and all these features that were specifically designed so he can do exactly what he was meant to do. There are literally millions of examples, irreducible complexity. And just a couple more we'll talk about quickly. You have to think about which came first, blood or the vessels, veins, and capillaries to carry the blood, okay? If one came before the other, it makes absolutely no sense. It has to be there from the beginning. Talk about blood clotting. There are 10 steps involved in blood clotting. There's all these different things that have to happen. If one of them doesn't work, you bleed to death. All 10 had to be there from the beginning. Which came first, the nucleus of the cell, where the instructions to make the cell are stored, or the instructions themselves before there was a place to store them? Similarly, the genetic information can't be translated except with many different enzymes, which are themselves encoded. So the code can't be translated except via the products of its translation. So we've got this vicious circle that evolutionists can't deal with. So a couple more things I don't have slides for, but a couple more things that really point to a creator are the many symbiotic relationships that we see all around us. And that's where you've got two things that require each other to live. So some examples. Bacteria that live inside the guts of a lot of animals, including humans, though we're not animals, but they live inside us as well. And they help with digestion, and we need them in there. Meanwhile, the bacteria need to live there, or else that's where they're designed to be. That's where they need to be. I have to take probiotics because my gut doesn't make enough of this good bacteria that I need, probably because of some mutation that I have. And so I have to take extra. Also, many plants in the world require pollinators to be able to reproduce. And those pollinators, the insects and other animals, need those certain plants as a food source. So you really have to have both at the same time. And lastly, we'll talk about instincts. So there are so many examples of instincts in the world, and evolutionists have no idea, no explanation where instincts come from. You can look at human babies that just have that suckling reflex. Any mammal, really. I mean, look at a baby deer, it's born, and right away it knows where to go on its mother to eat. No one's told that deer where its next meal is. He has no idea. He was just inside this thing where he couldn't see anything, and a few minutes later he's eating from his mom. There's a great example, another Dr. Joe Martin video, of a bird called a Pacific golden plover, which is absolutely incredible. So the whole idea of migratory birds and other animals is something evolutionists can't explain as well, but I think this is the most incredible example of migration. So the golden plover spends its winter in Hawaii, and it spends its summer in Alaska. That's 3,000 miles away over water. And this is not a big bird. It weighs about 3 pounds or so, but it almost doubles its body weight in the summer eating, because when it flies home, after it has hatched its chicks, it loses approximately 50% of its body weight on an 88-hour non-stop flight, and it manages to get back to a location in Hawaii about the size of the church property. It always kind of comes back to the same place. Here's what's the most incredible thing. Its chicks, which have never been in Hawaii, once they're big enough and have built up their body weight as well to be able to handle this journey, they then take off and go to the exact location in Hawaii where they've never been, but that's where its parents come from. That's incredible. I think that's amazing. My dog, Scout, illustrated instincts amazingly this summer, where he's never been interested in even looking at grass unless there was some dog poop there or something. Then he was really interested. But for some reason this summer, he started eating grass. All day long, he wanted to get outside because he had this craving for grass. And so I looked it up. Why is my dog eating grass? Because when dogs have some sort of indigestion or upset stomach, eating grass helps that and relieves that. How in the world did he know that something he's never been interested in eating before was going to soothe his stomach? Instincts that God placed there. So in sum, and right on time, 10:45, there's not just one or two things that point to a creator. Everything that we observe around us, from the universe down to the nucleus of a cell, is evidence, and amazing evidence, that we have a designer, a creator God. So that's it, and I will finish everything you need to know during the message this morning.